The National Directorate of Public Prosecutions has released a statement confirming that it has received presentations from Oupa, Magashula and Pillay, calling on the NPA to review the decision to prosecute them.
The representations were made by the lawyers of the two former SARS heads today. The developments follow last week's revelations by the NPA that besides the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, it was also prosecuting Magashula and Pillay. On Friday, Gordhan rejected an invitation by the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Sean Abrahams, to make representations regarding the fraud charges against him. The NDPP has summoned Gordhan to appear in court on fraud charges on November the 2nd.
The charges relate to the retirement package and extension of contract granted to former senior official Pillay.
Well, for more on this story, we now cross live to Pretoria with the NPA spokesperson, Luvuyo Mfaku, who's in our studio in Pretoria. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the program. Very briefly, what transpired in a meeting between the NPA and lawyers representing Mr. Pillay and Mr. Magashula?
Good evening, Peter, and your viewers. What happened today, the National Director was approached by legal representatives representing Mr. Pillay and Mr. Magashula, asking him to invoke the provisions of Section 179, subsection 5D of the Constitution to review the decision that was taken by Dr. Tori Pretorius SC in consultation with Advocate Mzinyati to prosecute the two. The National Director gave them an ear. They made oral representations today.
All right. Help the public understand. You know, when the NPA Director, Mr. Abrahams, last week called this press conference and declared to the public that this is what he was going to do, hadn't he applied his mind at that point whether there was a reasonable case? He seemed to think so at the time. Why would there be a need for a review, particularly in such a high-profile case involving very important officials, including the minister? One would have thought they'd have looked through all the evidence and then decided to prosecute or not. Did they not do that we needed a review?
Peter, I think it is very prudent to outline the decision-making process in the NPA as well as the layers of leadership. People who make decisions, whether to prosecute or not, are directors of public prosecutions and special directors of public prosecutions. In this case, the matter was handled by Acting Special Director Dr. Tori Pretorius, who made the decision in consultation with Advocates Bongile Mzinyati. The National Director, at no stage was he ever involved in terms of perusing the docket as well as making such a decision. That is why in the NPA Act as well as in the Constitution you have got this legislative framework that provides for a review process so that if a member of the public who has been indicted on any offense can, if not satisfied with the decision-making process, can approach the National Director to review the decision of his directors of public prosecutions. In this case, he was never involved in the case. He does not actually know what is contained in the docket.
So
suffice to say that he was briefed. He was given just a briefing by the Director of Public Prosecution and the Special Director about their decision and the reasons for their decision.
So why a press conference before you've gone through the processes?
The process, the act is very clear. It says when approached by an accused person, in the instant case, when he announced the decision, there was no request for representations. Their legal representatives never approached him to say, before you make your decision, we'd like to make the representations. He made the announcement on the strength of what was provided by the Special Director as well as the DPP in terms of their decision.
All right, so what are the consequences to the Finance Minister? Because he's made it clear that he's not interested in this process. He says he has no faith in the National Prosecuting Authority to give him a fair hearing.
The National Director indicated today that he has invited, despite the fact that the Minister of Finance indicated publicly that he is not interested in approaching the National Director to review the decision of the Special Director. However, he has deemed it prudent to invite the Minister through his lawyers to make representations to him by tomorrow. The cutoff date is 5 o'clock.
If he doesn't, what happens? Do the charges as they stand stay the same, and will he continue to be prosecuted?
He has already been approached by Mr. Pillay and Mr. Magashula. What happens now, they will have to present information that they firmly believe is not part of the docket, or if the National Director, when he reconsiders, will look at it in conjunction with what is contained in the docket. So in a nutshell, we'll look at the docket holistically with the information that they have supplied. But it would be prudent for the Minister as well to make representation so that his side of the story can be heard as well during this process.
What I'm saying is that he's not coming, right? So what's going to happen to the Minister? Does the case as it stands now remain if he makes no representations at all?
He has invited to make representations. Let's allow them to consider the invitation, and before we can actually talk about whether he would make the representation or not. But however, if he has not made the representation, Mr. Pillay and Magashula have made the representation, the NDPP will consider what they have provided and what is contained in the docket and decide on the way forward.
All right, your thoughts about reports and representations that are coming through that that SARS itself, its legal department, gave advice to the Minister almost a year before Mr. Pillay was reappointed or took early retirement, that there would be nothing wrong with him taking early retirement and then being reappointed. If their legal department gave him that advice, then surely he's not liable.
We would not like at this stage to get into the merits of the case. We've invited them. Hence, if you look at our statement, the National Director invited even the Commissioner of SARS, Tom Moyana, to make representation as well as the head of the Hawk, so that to enable him to look at the matter holistically.
Another lawyer has suggested that the regulations of the Government Employees Pension Fund suggest that there is nothing wrong with this action, and in fact that it happens on a regular basis. If that's the case, are you undertaking to prosecute every single instance where this has happened, where somebody has taken early retirement and has been rehired? Because in your view, this is fraud.
With all due respect, the matter is still under consideration. Technically, it's before court. So we cannot actually articulate ourselves on the merits of the matter.
All right, but just to say that if you think that this case has merit, will you treat like cases in the same way in the future?
Whenever a docket is presented to us, which is fully investigated, and prosecutors firmly believe that the investigation is complete and there's a case to answer, we will prosecute.
All right, so a lot of people are saying that this is politically charged and the timing is questionable. Your response to that?
We deal with criminal dockets and criminal offenses. We do not deal with any political related matters. When we consider a matter that is any matter, we look solely on the merits, no political considerations whatsoever.
Matthew Sposa today has suggested that an investigation should be launched into the NPA head, Mr. Abrahams, in his conduct, suggesting that perhaps this may have malicious motives. Is that something that has been made aware to you? And if you go ahead with this prosecution and it is proved that perhaps there's no merit here, could you face malicious prosecution charges?
Peter, I've indicated earlier that we do not really want to get into the merits of the matter. We've heard what Mr. Posa said. Mr. Posa is a politician. We would not want to respond up until we get the basis for whatever investigation that he wants to be conducted. At this stage, we are not prepared to get involved.
Is it possible, after the representations that you've received and Mr. Abrahams has had a chance to look at the case, that charges may not be continue, or that this case may not continue?
That is the nature of representations. You ask the National Director to review. I mean, by review, I mean to reconsider a decision that has been taken by his functionaries. Now, in this case, if the National Director, after looking at what is presented to him and what is contained in the docket, in conjunction with his leadership team, that is his deputies, they will decide whether the matter is reviewable. By that I mean whether to proceed with the charges or not to proceed.
All right, so what's happened since the press conference and now? Because it seems as if there's a retreat almost by Mr. Abrahams since that press conference. Has it got anything to do with the President suggesting that you proceed with caution?
Got nothing to do with anything other than to give effect to the legislative framework. The review process is provided for in the legislation. We therefore have to afford any accused person an opportunity to make representation and hear his side of the story.
All right, so you're still convinced you've got a solid case, but it's up for review?
We still firmly believe that the case as it was articulated and the decision that was taken by the Special Director of Public Prosecutions in conjunction with the DPP in North Gauteng is a sound one. The National Director will have to be convinced otherwise by the representations that have been provided and are going to be presented to him.
All right, Mr. Mfaku, we're going to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for giving us some insights on the day's events. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
My pleasure, sir.
All right, that was Luvuyo Mfaku, who's the spokesperson for the National Prosecuting Authority, talking to us live from Pretoria.